Welcome back to another one of my videos. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Laura, and today I'm going to show you how to make a traditional Austrian cake, which is the Sachertorte. Now for the dough, you're going to need 125 grams of softened butter, 200 grams of sugar with a pinch of salt, 4 room temperature eggs, 200 grams of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/8 of a liter or 125 milliliters of milk, and 125 grams of dark chocolate. Now we're going to start by heating up our chocolate over a water bath until it's nice and melted. And in the meantime, we can already go ahead and cream together our butter, sugar, and salt until nice and fluffy. Now remember, with your water bath, you don't want the water touching the bottom of your bowl, and you also don't want the water to boil. Now I already went ahead and separated my egg yolks from my egg whites. So now that our butter sugar mixture is super light and fluffy, we can go ahead and add 1 egg yolk at a time and let that incorporate. And in the meantime, we can already whisk up our egg whites until we have some nice stiff peaks. We can set the egg whites aside for now because these are going to be folded in at the very end. At this point, our chocolate has also had the chance to completely melt. So we're going to simply add our melted chocolate into our butter, egg, sugar mixture and let that whisk together just until combined. The bowl is like almost perfectly clean. Now you also want to make sure to scrape down the sides just to make sure that everything's getting incorporated. Now at this point we can go ahead and add the remaining ingredients. So I'm going to go ahead and sieve in half of my dry ingredients and add half of my milk and let that mix really quickly before adding the second half of my milk and the second half of my dry ingredients. Now you don't want to overmix your dough, so once your dry ingredients are about 80 to 90% incorporated, you can stop mixing it. Now the very last thing that we need to do is fold in our stiff egg whites. Our cake can now wander into the oven that's been preheated to 180 degrees Celsius or 306 degrees Fahrenheit for about 35 minutes. Now that our cake is pretty much cooled off, we're going to cut it in half once. I've set my cake slices to the side for now, so at this point we can get to making our apricot glaze, which is going to cover our entire cake as well as the inside layer. Now basically all we're going to do for this is heat up 150 grams of apricot jam with a splash of water in a pot, and we're going to let that boil for 1 to 2 minutes. Now it is really important to heat up our jam because, as you can tell, if you were to use just regular jam out of your glass, it's super sticky like this. So if you try to pour a chocolate glaze on top, it will be a hot, sticky mess. But as soon as you heat up your jam and you let it cool off on your cake, it creates like a barrier for your cake crumbs and everything else, and it creates kind of like a film. So it becomes not sticky to the touch, which is exactly what you want. And essentially that's going to allow your chocolate glaze to run down super smoothly, and it's also going to make sure that no crumbs from our cake is going to get into our chocolate glaze. Now, if your jam has lots of big pieces of fruit still in it, you can also go ahead and puree it to make sure that there's no clumps in it. And that's just gonna make sure that your film on your cake is just extra smooth. Honestly, I don't care too much about it. Mine is a little bit chunky, but I think once I heat it up, it's going to become a lot more smooth anyways, so I'm not gonna bother pureeing it. Now I'm going to be using the top of my cake as my bottom. Now the top of the cake is usually not quite as smooth, and because we want a really nice smooth top, I just flipped it around to make sure that the ugly side, or the not so even side, is going to be at the bottom. Now we're going to add 1 layer of our apricot jam in the middle to act as a glue for our 2 cake layers. You can use a pastry brush or a palette knife to spread it out quite evenly. Now we want to cover the entire cake in a thin layer of our apricot jam. If your jam has cooled down too quickly and it's getting too thick to spread, you can always heat it back up on the stove with another splash of water. Now at this point, this needs to go into the fridge for at least 30 minutes to completely set before we make our chocolate glaze. Now for the chocolate glaze, you're going to need 150 grams of chocolate as well as 1 tablespoon of coconut oil. Once again, the coconut oil is just going to help to thin out our chocolate to make it a little bit easier to spread all over our cake. And as per usual, we're going to heat this up over a water bath. Once again, you don't want the water to touch the bottom of your pot, and you also don't want it to boil. Now, alternatively, you can also always use a chocolate ganache to cover your cake. Now that our chocolate is nice and melted, we are going to carefully pour it all over our cake and smooth it out as fast as possible. Now, because the cake is cold, it is going to chill our chocolate rather quickly, so you do want to work quite quickly. I'm going to let the chocolate set just for a little bit before transferring it onto my cake platter. And remember that you can reuse any of the chocolate that's dripped off at the bottom. Now, if you feel confident enough, you can use some of your melted chocolate to write Sacha on your cake, or you can leave it just the way it is. So that's going to be everything for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, you can give it a thumbs up or write me a comment down below. And as always, the whole recipe is going to be in the description box as well.